Hello. Today we're going to be going through the custom ad hoc reporting functionality that is provided with the Kuali research application. If your institution is cloud hosted and you have signed up for the advanced ad hoc reporting functionality, you will be given an account where you can log directly into the BIME dashboard and make custom queries, custom reports based on the data sources that we have set up for you. If you need data points that are not available in your data sources, you will need to work with us and we can add those data points, we can build those out for you. But you can do a lot with the query builder and dashboard builder and the data structures that we already have in place. So I am in the BIME dashboard. I've already gone to kuali.bime.io and logged in with my credentials. You'll be provided with those. And I've gone to the data sources screen so I can see what's available. So I'm going to search for Greendale. And this is going to show me some of my data sources that I have available. And you'll have a limited list of the data sources that are available for your institution. And we will have built in custom data and other items that you identified as necessary for your reporting during your implementation process. So I'm going to go into the awards general data source for Greendale. And this one is explicitly empty. So this is going to be a situation where we're going to start from scratch and we're going to build out a whole new report. So we can click on New Query. And this is going to give us the BIME query builder. So first, I want to name my query. So I'm going to name it Award Count by Fiscal Year and Quarter. So that's going to be the name of the query. And the first thing to note is that we have a row list here, and then we have a column list. And this does not mean what you might think it means in terms of just doing a table format output. These are really driven on how the data will be pivoted and used in the final visual displays. And if you actually do a table format, which we'll get to a little differently, these aren't used quite the way you expect them to be used. So we're going to start out and we're going to go to columns. And I want to do an award count by fiscal year and quarter. And so the first thing that I want to do is I want this to be on the obligated start date, just as an example. So we go down and look at obligated start date. And we don't have any fiscal year information here. Okay, you might think that's a problem. That's actually something that you can build automatically. If you need fiscal year information on a date that we haven't provided, if we go over here to the side, we have data structure, this little data cube here. So we're going to scroll down to our obligated start date. And the system automatically breaks it down so you can look at obligated start date by year, half year, quarter, and that's useful, but all of that is based on a regular calendar year, and we want this to be driven off of fiscal year. So if we go down to obligation start date, there's a little drop down here, and I'm going to choose define fiscal year. So here, I'm going to click on fiscal year for obligation start date, starts at month, and right here, it's set to July. July is what I want. If your particular institution has a different fiscal year, you can choose the month that's appropriate and pivot your fiscal year appropriately. So I'm going to hit save. And now when I go and I look at my columns and I scroll down, and I get to obligation start date, I have these additional options at the bottom. And these are the calculated items that are derived from obligation start date. So at the top, I want to choose fiscal quarter because I want this to break down by fiscal year and quarter. And so I'm going to start and make my main column quarter and apply. Now you'll notice nothing's calculating yet. I'm choosing all of my options first so that the first calculation is set up the way I want it to be. And now I'm going to go to rows, and we're going to go down, and for this one, we're going to choose fiscal year. And I know it's not totally clear why I put one in column and one in rows. It will be clear in just a second. So now that we have those, I'm going to do a dynamic count as my metric. So the metric is what makes the engine go. It's what's telling the query what to calculate on. In this case, I'm just going to be doing a count of the number of awards. And this is based on a set of test data. So you'll see fiscal quarter is the primary piece of data that's displaying in this information. And so if I go to a more recent area, we can see these quarters for, we had 14 items in quarter 2, 42 in quarter 3. And again, this is a bit of test information. Now, the system has taken the rows, the fiscal year, and it's turned that into a filter for me. So I can actually choose which fiscal year I want to see. If I'd put fiscal year up here as well, it just would have put a solid breakdown for everything in a single pie chart, and that wouldn't have necessarily been useful. You'll also notice it defaulted to pie chart. Now, I may or may not want that. If we go over here to visualization type, there are a bunch of different charts that you can choose from. Now, in this case, I actually do kind of like pie chart, but if I'm going to keep manipulating things, if I leave it on auto, it might at some point say, oh, this looks better as a bar chart, or I'm guessing this looks better as a bar chart. It is kind of nice to have it just pick that, but once you know what you want, it does make sense to come to visualization. I'm going to manually choose pie, so if I go in and continue to manipulate things and add additional metrics, it's going to stay on pie chart. The other thing I notice is its default configuration. It shows the same color for quarter 1 and quarter 4. Again, having it just sort of guess everything for you is nice because you don't have to go through the steps of choosing all your colors yourself, but occasionally the defaults won't be quite what you want. So we're going to go over to chart configuration, and I'm going to click on colors. And I can see Q1 and Q4 the same color. That's not ideal. So we're going to click on Q4, and I'm going to choose something that's totally different. We have a red, a green, and obviously the yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and go down here and choose a purple. And so now my quarters are broken out, and it's very easy to tell them apart. And I can choose which fiscal year I want to look at. If I hold down the control button, I can choose multiple fiscal years, and you can see how this breaks out. And so you can create a very interactive report here. There are a lot of additional options, and the different visualizations behave in very different ways. So I would encourage you to play around, see how they work. You can also go to YouTube and search for BIME reporting tutorials. The company BIME does actually provide quite a few of them. And so you can dive more deeply into that. But this is a good place to get started and to see how you can put this together. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and save this. This is doing roughly what I want it to do. I have the option to save as new dashboard. I don't recommend doing that. Again, some of the automatic functionality where it's just going to kind of guess what you want. I prefer to have a little bit more control. So I'm just going to save as new in the queries library. That's great. This will be here for me to put on a dashboard later. So right now, this query, I can get to it because I have access to this login. If someone goes to the Kuali portal, this won't be visible to them just yet. There are a few more steps we need to do. So I'm going to go back to the library, and it's here to choose from. That's great. I'm going to go back to data sources. And I want to build out a table report because, like I said, table reports look a little different, and they're not quite what you expect them to be. So we did our report on award numbers based on fiscal year and fiscal quarter and that breakdown. That's great. Now I want to do a working report on negotiation activities that basically is going to come in and it's going to automatically give me an output of what are my open negotiation activities and how long have they been open? Is it past a certain amount? So we can build in some filters. And this is the sort of view that you could go in and use the out-of-the-box reports and build this out. But having it defaulted, just being able to go with a couple mouse clicks and get to something that you're going to use on a weekly, maybe even daily basis, can save a lot of time. So it might be worth building out. Generally, we want the information from the activities list. We just want to apply some automatic filters and information to it. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to hit duplicate. And now we have the option to create our new query. And instead of activities list, I'm going to do negotiation open activities. And actually, let's call it open stale activities. So I'm going to hit OK. And now we have this new query to work from. But right now, it's identical to the list query. So the first thing I want to talk about is here are our column headers. You'll notice they're listed in rows. Columns are really, in this query builder, more about the primary data point that these other visualizations will be pivoted off of. When you're actually working in a table, you want your columns to be listed in the rows. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but it is the way the system works. It's the way that BIME handles this. So that's one of the first things that we want to look at. So now we want to come in here and we have these activities and see what's displaying, if there's anything we want to change. So there are some custom data fields built in here. That's great. But as it turns out, we don't really need these fields for this particular agreement because we just want to check and see what's open. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of those. I came over to my rows and just deleted them. So we can come over here and look and, that's great. They're not there anymore and we can streamline this down. We want to look at our filters. So let's open up our filter options and let's go down and we're going to filter based on the activity end date. So we can come in here and we can look at the activity end date. So we want to choose null. We want it to include all of the activities that don't have an end date yet. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. So cool. Now we know that these are only going to be open activities. That also kind of puts us in a situation where we're like, well, do we really need to list activity end date? We can filter on it without it being included right here in the list. So let's get rid of that because we know everything on this report doesn't have an activity end date yet. And also, it's not going to have a negotiation end date. We know that if it doesn't, when you close a negotiation, then it closes out all the activities. So we know that this is going to be blank in all cases, so we can go ahead and get rid of that and really focus in on what's important. So here we have our negotiators, and we know that these are all the open activities. That's great. So we want to look at negotiation start date. This is really about stale activities. So if something was opened yesterday, we don't necessarily want it on this report. This is kind of our, have a meeting once a week, look at which items are stale and we need to do things to move forward. So I'm going to add another filter. And this time we're going to go down and we're going to look at activity created date. Click on edit date ranges. Instead of just picking fixed periods, go to advanced. We want to do from the beginning of all history, and for our end range, we want that to be 1 week in the past. So we want it to show everything that is basically more than a week old. Was this activity created more than a week ago? And so that's going to give us this. I'm going to hit apply. And now these are all activities that are over a week old and are still open. And so we can look at them and say, hey, why are these activities still open? What's going on? So that's great. We have a stale activities report. This is something that, again, you could go in and build with the out-of-the-box item, but you see it took me a little while to get all of this in place. And do you really want to go and do that every single time you want to run this report? This is just something now that you'll be able to go, click, pull for that once a week, break down barriers in your award negotiation process. So that's great. So we're going to come up here and we're going to update our query. It already existed, unlike the other one, because we started by copying a pre-existing query. And now we're going to go back to the library. So we have a couple reports that we can put on a dashboard. So now I'm going to go to the dashboard and we're going to go up here. And so here we have our dashboard that's already in our folder. You're going to have a folder that's ready for you for your institution. But we want to build a new dashboard. So I'm going to click on New now that I'm in the folder. And we're going to come here and we want to call this Greendale Custom Dashboard. All right. And we want to come here and there are a bunch of options for what we can include. So we have tab options, we can play around with the dashboard title, we can go to the dashboard itself and add an object. So I'm going to start out by adding another tab, because I know I have 2 reports that I want to put in here. So I'm going to rename this one, and we're going to make this the negotiations stale dashboard. And name that awards by fiscal year and fiscal quarter. So now if we go back to our dashboard, we can add an object. And this time I'm going to add a query. So we're going to go back into our awards general data source and choose the query that we just selected. I'm going to select that, and it's going to pull it in. And you can see that I have all my interface and option here, which is great. I want to drag this out. And now I have, all the information that I had from my report. I can interact with it in terms of fiscal year. But say I also want this to come with some extra filtering options. So we can come back up here and I can add a data filter. So now I have a data filter and I want to be able to look at this by lead unit. And I don't want this whole crazy list to show up on the side automatically. So I'm going to choose in panel on the right. And now I can click there and I can see what the options are. This is going to make room for me to add additional data filters. So I'm going to go back to edit filter. And I also want to be able to do a search by sponsor type and by prime sponsor type. And I want both of those to also be in panel on the right. And parent unit. And so now we have some additional data filter options. So I can apply, and we can pull these over. I can make this a little smaller, make this a little smaller. And maybe I don't want this header to display because, I can train my users to know that this is a data filter. So I can go over to widget options and hide show header and get rid of the header. Maybe I do want this to display here, but maybe I don't. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and hide it. So next, we're going to go to the Negotiation Stale Activity tab, and I'm going to go to the dashboard, and we're going to add a query again. So it brings us back here. This query is from a different data source. You can pull in multiple data sources to a specific dashboard. So we're going to choose our negotiations activity, and we want our negotiation open stale activities report. And this is basically the same process. So we're going to pull this in, spread it out so we can look at it. And this is great. Again, there are a couple filters that would be nice here. So we're going to add an object, and we're going to add a data filter again. And so there are a couple data sources on this dashboard now, so we need to choose which one we want this data filter to point at. We want it to point at the negotiation activities. So the primary thing that I want to pivot this against is negotiator. And again, in a panel on the right, and apply. And so now we can do stale activities for specific negotiators in the office. And again, we can go here and look at our widget options, and we want to get rid of that header. And we can come here and we can get rid of the header. We can show the header. Either way works. So this is really how you build out your dashboards. And so if I come here and I just want to see Alan McAfee's items, then now I can just look at the stale activities for Alan McAfee. This is also something where Alan could come in and filter this for himself, which is really useful. I can also come in and clear that out. And now I can see the entire report again. A manager could come in and only select their direct reports and see everything that's open and stale for their particular team. So there's still a little bit of manipulation and kind of custom work that could happen once you're in here, but it's a lot less than refining all of this down from the complete negotiation activity list. And we were also able to remove a couple columns that didn't apply to our use case. So that's great. Let's say this is ready to publish. So we want to put in publish changes. We're going to search and see where we want to publish this. So the Res P1 Greendale is going to put this in our production environment. I can choose that, and you'll have an account that is associated with your particular institution. It's the only one that will come up. And so once we select this, we don't need to notify viewers by email because we are using publishing to actually put directly into the Kuali portal. And then once I hit OK, it's going to publish this to the reports tab. Now, before I do that, I did this as a completely new name. So this will appear at the top level of the reports tab. If you're in the reports tab, there's a little bit of organization. There are subsections. If I wanted to put this in a subsection, and I did awards dash, this will appear in the awards section, but still be listed as Greendale custom dashboard. You can also build out new sections this way. Anything you put new here, and then the dash, and then the name of the report will build out a new section in your reports view. It does take a little bit of time after you've published for things to show up in the Kuali portal, maybe 5 minutes or so, depending on how things are refreshing. So we have everything in place. I can hit publish changes, choose Res P1 Greendale, and then hit OK, and this is going to show up in my portal. I hope this has been useful. This is just kind of a quick run through of the most significant parts of BIME that you're likely to use very often. There's a lot more information out there on BIME and the query builder, more than I could ever possibly include in a single report video. You can go out and find BIME's guides on YouTube as well, and that will help you a lot on building out your ad hoc reports for your institution. I hope this has been useful.